Thank you everybody for coming. Again, it's a beautiful night, but maybe you're sitting on your porch enjoying it while you're also participating. So we appreciate you being here. For those that don't know me, I'm Stephanie Walsh. I'm the head of the Neighborhood Association. We have these meetings almost monthly. We post about them on our website and on the listserv and on our Facebook page. And we're going to let Zone 5, Commander Venanzi is with us this evening. He is going to give us an update. I'll provide a few updates about what's going on with the Highland Park Community Council in the neighborhood. And then our two presentations. First, we have folks from the city here to talk about some interesting things happening with Reservoir Drive. They'll make things better, hopefully, for pedestrians and cyclists. And then we have folks from the zoo here to talk about some potential changes to their ticketing area. So, but Commander, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's good to see a lot of folks join the meeting tonight. Thank you for sharing your time with us. These are the crimes that happened in Highland Park the past 30 days. On July 20th on Lake Drive. This was approximately 6:30 p.m. Female was swimming at the pool with a male companion. She went to go use the bathroom, and the male was not present where she had left her purse. Somebody took her bag with her keys and stole her car. The vehicle was recovered a short time later, but please always make sure your valuables are secured whenever, if you do use the pool. On the 23rd and 5500 block of Hampton, we had a theft from vehicle. No other theft from vehicles reported in a month. On August 4th, we had an aggravated assault incident. This was the 800 block of North Euclid. A female stabbed a known male who had been staying with her. The female was arrested on scene, and fortunately, the victim was a female who was stabbed, and her male companion had stabbed her after an argument, and he was arrested on scene. And finally, we had a vehicle theft in the 6100 block of Stanton on August 14th. That was at about 1:50 a.m. And that's all we have for crimes to report. I just also want to share that we have had extra officers patrolling the park. It's good to see some development coming to Reservoir Drive. I know a lot of times people do move through there fast. I know one of our cycle officers had stopped and cited a vehicle doing some burnouts there. So we are trying to step up extra patrols there, knowing that there's a lot of folks up there that shouldn't be up or doing what they're doing. So we'll patrol as often as we can. Also, for the shooting range, no dates yet. There is a recruit class in. I believe they're going to be shooting probably in December, but as soon as I get that schedule, I'll send it out to everybody to share. And does anybody have any questions for me?
Great. Thank you so much, Commander. Oh, wait.
Oh, sorry. One quickie. Sorry, I was chewing. Dinner. Commander, nice to see you. My only thought was during Reservoir of Jazz, cars were going the back way. They were using that partial lane that's open as a two-way road. And I know the police came later in the day and they were ticketing people who were double parking, like parking in the walkway, pedestrian and bike lanes. But is there anything that we can do? I mean, I was just really worried sitting there in the grass watching cars going both directions in there, because that has not been the case for many, many years.
Yeah, you know what, I will bring that up because I know that that is a concerning area. To try to have an officer up there monitor that more often. But you're right, it's kind of a blind area, and somebody can get hurt. But I appreciate you bringing up that concern.
Thank you.
Great. Anybody else? No. Well, thanks for joining us, Commander. We appreciate you coming and taking the time out of your evening.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And again, if you're just joining us, this is being recorded. You probably got a message about that, but just to make sure everybody knows. Just a couple of Highland Park Community Council updates to piggyback on what Monica was saying about the traffic. If you were at the concert early, a big tree branch fell on the sort of the south side of the road, like towards where the houses are, like a disturbingly large, could have really hurt someone, tree branch. And so I called Public Works. They told me they would take the tree down this week, and they haven't. So I'm going to follow up with them tomorrow, just to make sure that no one gets hurt. Even if it's not Reservoir Jazz, that's a really popular area for people to sort of use that part of the lawn. So that is something that we're sort of working toward. I also just some things coming up for fall. We do have some new events. Our fall and winter calendar will be out next month, but just a little heads up, our children's committee is working to do at least one event a month, and they're starting a new event in September, a back to school event. It's going to be September 9th up at the playground at 10 in the morning. So that's something to look forward to. In October, some old favorites return. The weekend of October 14th and 15th, we'll have our parklet cleanup on Saturday and the pumpkin patch on Sunday. And the Halloween parade returns on October 28th. And so those are some things to look forward to. Also, some of you might have noticed that we didn't send out a newsletter in the mail this spring. It's something we typically do in the month of May, but we have started to do more community events in the spring and early summer, and our volunteers just realized it was just a lot to do all these events and do the newsletter. So we decided that we could do a better job if we postponed the newsletter till fall. So we're working on a print newsletter right now that will be coming out to you in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So you can look for that. And one of the things that we're working to include are updates from the utility companies, particularly PWSA and Peoples, to try to get some more information on all the current work and planned work. I know people are very interested, when is the disruption coming to your street? We're going to see if we can get as much information we can about their plans and share that with you. So those are just a few things to look forward to in the fall. Any other questions for the commander or questions about Highland Park Community Council goings on? All right. Well, with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first for our first presentation. Various folks from the city are going to be talking to us about a pilot project that's going to happen up at Reservoir Drive. And so I'd like to introduce Keith Portugal. He is our new community planner.
Keith, I am not sure what's going on with John Evans. He has 2 connections to the meeting, and I don't know which one to make as a co-host. So,
okay, John, if you can hear me, I have your slides, so just let me know when you're speaking to turn the slides, and I can do it from there.
Okay, thank you.
But of course, but I'll share my screen now. I have a little intro before I jump in for Mr. Evans's presentation.
So Domi's going to kick things off first, right?
Yes.
Just
yes,
clarifying.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Hi, everyone. Rebecca Rinaldo from Mayor Gainey's office. I know we have a very full agenda tonight, so just wanted to clarify the order.
Great. Should I go ahead and pop in then?
That would be whoever's going to start should start.
Okay, great. Kim Lucas, Director for the City's Department of Mobility and Infrastructure. Thank you all for having us tonight. We wanted to spend a couple minutes going over our planned project for later this construction season. So for 2023, as I'm sure all of you are well aware, Reservoir Drive has been closed to cars in order to fix the pedestrian tunnel, a long-awaited project that is led by the Department of Public Works. I'm sure many of you have participated in conversations over the past few years with members from DOMI, including our former traffic engineer, about making safety improvements to Reservoir Drive. So we are in a moment where we can take advantage of the fact that the road is closed and update and upgrade that roadway. As I'm sure if you've been on it recently, you know that it needs to be repaved. And when we repave our streets, we are in a position where we need to repaint them as well. And so what we are going to share with you tonight are the plans for what the street alignments will look like, the cross sections for when that street reopens, when Reservoir Drive reopens, that we're really glad that we're able to do, that we were able to identify resources to do that this year, so that we're able, when the street reopens, to have a better street than what was there when it was shut down. I know that there have been conversations in the community about these safety and maintenance improvements for a number of years. And I know that some of these have been really long awaited. And I also know that there's a lot of desire for a more robust plan for Highland Park overall. For our department, we're in charge of the right of way, and we're really the people who manage the streets and how those streets are working. And our number one goal is to improve safety of those streets. And so the designs that you're going to see tonight are ones that were developed in conversations with some members of the community. As I mentioned, I think dating back to maybe 2020 with our former municipal traffic engineer. And they've been updated a little bit to reflect some changes to crossings and things like that the new playground crossing has influenced. But overall, they mostly look like the ones that came out of those conversations. So again, we're resurfacing the street. It needs to be done as part of the finishing touches of this pedestrian tunnel construction project that's being managed by the Department of Public Works. We know that there's a desire for a much bigger planning exercise for Highland Park, and these plans shouldn't be construed as something that's going to stop any potential future investment in a larger planning exercise. But we wanted, again, to make sure that as we reopen the street, that we're reopening it in a condition that is in a state of good repair, and in one that's a little bit safer than it was, especially for our most vulnerable road users, so people walking and people biking. And with that, I'd like to kick it over to Paige Anderson, who is our project manager working on this design.
Hi, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? Cool.
Yes.
And I think someone made me a host. I should be able to share my screen. One sec, it's not letting me, but I'll do.
You have co-host privileges, so you should be able to share.
Yeah, when I opened the meeting, it updated Zoom, and now it's telling me I don't have my security won't let me. But I'm gonna try to turn it off. I can't figure it out quickly.
Are you on a Mac page? That actually just happened to me.
Yeah,
meeting
Mac has better internet.
Yeah.
Jan, do you by chance have the presentation pulled up? In a way, I'm gonna try to get this done, but as a
Paige,
backup.
you can email it to me and I can do it if that's not.
I have it. If you want to just make me a co-host, I can share my screen and
Who is that?
way. Paige. This is Jan, Jan, rather.
And everyone, just so you all know, Jan is fairly new to the mayor's office. He joined us in June as our new infrastructure engagement specialist on the neighborhood services team. He's really hit the ground running. So just so you all know, his role is to support DOMI and DPW with engagement and outreach. So you should look forward to getting to know him as he supports them on other projects as well.
Yeah, be able to
all
share.
right, I'm gonna try and share this now. Are you all seeing my slides now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna turn myself off. Paige, just tell me when to advance.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name is Paige Anderson. I'm the project manager here, and we just spoke with Kim. We'll just dive into the design. This is a pretty quick presentation just to walk through some features of it. We'll do the next slide. It's there it comes. So I think some of you know this timeline better than those of us who are here today, because I don't think any of us actually were working on this project. Any of the individuals here today were working on the project early on in 2021 when you were working with Nick Ross primarily. But this is the timeline as we understand it and what we posted on the Engage page, which I will link to at the end. But just for those of you who are not familiar, there was a short time where in 2020 we did a shutdown and pedestrianization of the Reservoir Drive loop. And I think that, from my understanding, kind of led to these kind of discussions about a pilot project and trying to make some improvements to the right-of-way allocation within the existing curb-to-curb right-of-way that we have on Reservoir Drive. But now in 2022, as you all know, the pedestrian tunnel and bridge project shut down part of the loop and kind of delayed that. So now we're looking at this fall, finally being able to get back in there, repaving, opening that bridge and tunnel project, and getting some new pavement markings and vertical elements installed. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the project goals, were discussed for a simple, maintenance and resurfacing project was that we could repave it. That's the important part. Do what we can to traffic calm, make more space for pedestrians and cyclists, and improve the crossings in particular. As you can see, the paving condition is, what led to this project. Next slide, please. So the most significant change that I think you'll see in the park, especially as a pedestrian or cyclist, is wider paths and wider lanes. So we are adding, reallocating some of the space to bring that travel lane down to a minimum to the minimum width that we can do on a road with normal cars, and that's 10 feet. There'll still be a parking lane, and we're going to use a little bit of that space we have allocated from what was formerly the 26-foot travel and parking lane to create a buffer that can offer some protection to and add some extra space and breathing room for the pedestrian and cyclists in the park. But just taking a huge amount of that space that had been dedicated to a single travel lane and reallocating it. So that will also do a lot to calm traffic by having less space to drive in. Next slide, please. Additionally, we were notified of 4 target areas for pedestrian crossing improvements. I believe that the first plan that you had talked about had 1, 2, and 3, but then the playground had been still a topic of concern that was as it was relayed to me. So I'm going to show you now some draft designs. These are updated. We literally just got these this week. So they are going to be still draft designs and by no means finished, but we're almost finished, but they're still considered drafts. We still have a few finishing touches and first one, which is North Highland. So this is the main entrance to the park. The biggest reason that these designs are slightly different than the designs that are actually currently on the website, I'm going to link this PowerPoint with the updated designs, but the project designs that were concluded that we arrived at 2 years ago, those ones did a lot to work around the existing pavement marking because that project design was meant to be done without repaving, but now because of repaving, we can do what I think is a better design because we are not beholden to the existing pavement marking. So an example of that is smoothing out some of this triangle here and in doing at this intersection at the main entrance, and then adding 3 crosswalks where there are currently none, connecting the existing desire lines of the pedestrian paths along the park, and adding flex posts to channelize channelize all the vehicles through that 10-foot travel lane, which is very narrow, slowly, and as they, slowing them down with the most important points, which is these pedestrian crossings.
Paige, may I interrupt for a minute, only because I worked on a lot of this. Can you go back one slide, please? The triangular area that you see with the yellow paint that was there, we were actually thinking about doing a low planting that actually had cement edges to make sure that nobody could go through that space. And then the other thing is the on the fountain side, there are handicap access in the curb cuts. I mean, there are actually curb cuts for handicapped access, but on the North Highland Avenue side, there are not. Will you be repairing those sidewalks and putting handicap cuts in for those crosswalks?
No, this is at this point, this project, the way that the sidewalks are we looked into if there was ways to improve the ramps there, but with the dramatic state of sidewalk, like the sidewalk is got a sandstone thing, so it's not gonna be able to fit within the scope of this resurfacing project. But we did try to take the areas that are currently the most accessible and the most worn down, and clearly the current desired paths and work within those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We did look at a few places for, but what with a lot of the constraints there are based around like the old sandstone curbs that you see. So the second location, similarly to that main entrance, it's sort of just a football field of asphalt. So the big change that we can make is taking and closing off as much of that asphalt as possible with a painted bump out. So these painted bumps will make it so that those turns are really tight and not be able to move quickly through these intersections. Because again, we wanted to to take all of our traffic calming tools and use them at the pedestrian crossings. So that's where you're going to see the most dramatic changes. This project, this intersection includes 4 new crosswalks and some bike conflict markings at this parking lot, which I failed to label, but it's on the left there. And again, the same section with a wider bike lane and pedestrian lane through here.
And Paige, I know it's marked that the bump outs there would be with the posts. Would the long-term plan be to actually do a curb cut and add like planting there and reclaim that area that's now all concrete? Or what's the vision?
I think that this space is Domi, and I can let someone else answer if they have more to follow up, but as far as like the resurfacing project goes, we've reclaimed the space and it's there, and I think it's available to use and perhaps get permits to use at times, but right now it will just be protected by flex posts to keep people from driving through it, and this is where it's going to be at the completion of this project.
Paige, what's the pedestrian path in that space?
Yeah, there is this trail here on the right. If you see, like there's the pedestrian path on the asphalt is on the inner curb on the left side. But there is also the trail entrances here. As you probably know, as people who frequent the park, the trail, which I think you can see a little bit to the right in the current conditions photo, it's somewhere over there, and it's by no means ADA accessible, or it's kind of the dirt path. So that's why it is not, marked all the way to it. Primarily, we're just kind of trying to like use the crosswalks to alert the cars to where pedestrians cross. But the pedestrian, so there's the 2 paths, the asphalt side on the left and then the trail on the right.
Well, I'm thinking about the path down Farmhouse Drive. Because a lot of people walk, that goes down the hill, right, to the bottom of, I think it's Connecting Road. I don't want to take too long on this, but like I walk along that. I know a lot of people walk along that, and there really is no good sidewalk there. So doing something about the traffic, with all of these bump outs, which I think that are not very sightly, is not going to change the fact that people have to walk there and share the road, because the sidewalk is really there's really no sidewalk there. So it's not going to improve safety just to put all these unsightly flex posts.
Well, Howard, there's also the pedestrian walking lane, which is widening on the inside of the loop.
I'm talking about on the Farmhouse Drive, not on the Reservoir Drive.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm talking
Right,
about
so
Farmhouse Drive.
that's also a place that I walk up frequently, and many people do walk up, and I see people and their pets, mostly dogs, walking up on the road, and there's cars coming down using the exact same space.
Yeah.
And this doesn't provide any pedestrian safety into the park at this particular point.
Yeah,
One-
I 100% agree. This doesn't solve any of those problems on Farmhouse Drive.
Let me jump
Yeah,
in.
and I'm just going to chime in here for a second. I think, one of the challenges that we're faced with all of our infrastructure projects, we have to kind of set constraints on what the limits or the scope of a project can be. So for this project, it really is, what are the conditions that we can improve on Reservoir Drive? That doesn't take away from the experience that people are having on Farmhouse Drive, but I feel like that can be part of a separate discussion and something that we can evaluate further with community input. So, I think we can acknowledge that the challenges there and still focus on the improvements that we can make on Reservoir Drive itself. But my role is the infrastructure engagement piece of this, so happy to take a note about that and follow up later.
This is David Hance. This is speaking for the committee that began working with Domi back in 2020, and so what we're looking at here is the preliminary plan. It's really the phase 1 plan. It was the plan that we hoped to have in place for summer of 2021, so that we didn't sort of lose the momentum of the good things about having Reservoir Drive closed in 2020, but while also learning some lessons about, we really do need one car lane and a few things like that. So what we're really looking at is the preliminary plan, but the plan always was to have then a phase 2. And we were pleased this week to hear from Councilwoman Gross that seems to now be back in the planning. So this is temporary, that improves some things but not everything. But in the future, we really hope to see a replanning for a complete revisioning of Reservoir Drive. Right now, Reservoir Drive is 40 feet wide. There's over 6 acres of asphalt. There's huge runoff problems. It's gray where it should be green. We want to be removing asphalt in the upcoming sort of future revisioning, and really get much better separation between the single vehicle lane and pedestrians and cyclists. So, as we're saying here, we kind of recognize that there was so much that could be done in the preliminary plan, but then we come back and begin a process that leads to what we really hope and expect will be a complete revisioning of Reservoir Drive. And let's let Paige finish her thing, and then I'll come back in with just a couple more comments from the committee.
Great, thank you. And David, I liked what you said about just, repurposing, again, like just trying to repurpose as much space. With this resurfacing project, it is going to take the existing asphalt and make it nicer asphalt, but we can still think about how we can, use that space differently. And then in future changes, it might kind of set a framework for what kind of space you actually, minimizing the space for the vehicles moving through the park foremost. So if you could go to my next slide. And also I apologize that I titled this slide Farmhouse Drive when I should have said Farmhouse Drive intersection, because it is, again, the Reservoir Drive project. So then down at the filtration plant, there's the trail over here between the park. So this is the improved crossing. Again, just some flex posts to help channelize and slow down vehicles as they approach that crossing. And connecting to the pedestrian path on the inside. Next slide, please. And then finally, we went down to the playground. I know that it has been seen some changes and some updates, which are beautiful. So we found there's a, where the current stop sign and crossing is not lined up with the path into the park anymore. So we're going to shift it up to the correct place. Again, channelize the vehicles as they approach the intersection, keep vehicles from parking too close to the crossing so that sight lines remain visible, and move the stop sign to the new place. And then next slide, please. Just to remind you, so I will add this PowerPoint with these slides to the Engage page later. So right now, most of the information from this presentation is live on the Engage page, and you can find it at the link at the top. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, Paige and the director, this is David Hance again. So you've managed to find some photos of the worst of the paving. But that is not really the condition of the paving throughout the entire loop of Reservoir Drive. Given that the eventual plan, that they hope we are, kind of restarting phase 2 in a few years, is to remove as much asphalt as possible and institute stormwater measures, get landscaping, get better buffers between the vehicle lane and people, pedestrians and cyclists. Really change this 6 acres of asphalt into some far lesser amount of asphalt. So we question the wisdom of investing all that money now in replacing the entire drive when spot patching would work just fine. Most of the pavement is actually in quite good shape. And then we would suggest that the money that is saved from not repaving the entire drive go back over to the entrance, to the sidewalks, and the really very deficient sidewalk and accessibility paths from the main sidewalks coming up Highland Avenue into the park and across Reservoir Drive. We think that's a far better priority ASAP than spending all the money to repave the entire drive. Other than that, I think you've kind of picked up the major points of what we all agreed to, 2-3 years ago, and we really look forward to kind of continuing this engagement and the partnership in a consensus building project around a full revisioning of Reservoir Drive.
Thank you for that.
If I may, I would also like to just piggyback on what David just said. The last information I had from meetings that I've attended over the years was that there would be a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit in the park, which is now 25, I believe. So we're bringing down the speed limit, and I also question the wisdom of putting all these resources into a project that will be redone. The last thing I heard was that there would hopefully be space for like a green lane to separate some of these traffic lanes, the bikes and the pedestrians and so forth. So this is really, I truly appreciate the work that you all have done on this, but I got to tell you, it's a little disappointing because it's like we went from a really pretty cool, comprehensive vision to, no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to repave this and you're going to drive 15 miles an hour anyway. And it's really disheartening, but we thank you anyway. I thank you anyway. That's all.
All right, thanks, Andrea. There's a couple more hands up. If we can have Randy and then Nancy.
Yeah, hi, Paige. Thank you so much for doing this. I not surprisingly, I echo David's concerns about is the best use of money paving all of this. I also was going to ask, so I see what Domi has done on Ellsworth Avenue, where I go to work every day, and I think it's been really effective there with the traffic calming and the type of stuff you're talking about here. So I'm excited about that. But I'm worried that you're right now only going to constrict the cars at 4 places in over a mile loop. And so I would encourage you to consider additional locations, because I'm afraid what will happen is folks will slow down at those points, and then with their quarter mile to the next, impingement, we're going to actually see them accelerating through there. So I would encourage you to think about a couple extra locations where you could add some impingements. I'd love to see some speed bumps personally, or humps, whatever we're calling them these days, is the other thing I'd like to see added.
Right.
That's all I've got.
Great. Yeah, that's great feedback.
Okay, I have a question.
Mhm.
Before all this got closed, we would be able to drive up to the back of the reservoir and park around there so that we could walk without having to go up the 22 steps? Because we don't have handicap permits, but we're older, and that's trying to get from the bottom to the top is too hard. Are they going to make sure that cars are still able to get to that back part? That's real important.
Paige, you froze up. I don't think there's any change to access to the parking area in the back. That's planned.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Nancy?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to pile on a little bit about this resurfacing, but from a slightly different point of view. Paige, you started saying that the goal here is to improve safety. My real concern about repaving and having a nice smooth surface without any potholes or anything that are currently there, that we know that vehicles will travel at the speed the road will allow it to. And so a nice, clean, repaved surface is actually going to encourage cars to go faster than they currently do. There are apparently 15-mile-an-hour speed limit signs now in the park, which everybody ignores. I've sort of clocked cars, and they probably average 30 to 35 miles an hour. I've often seen cars going 40 or 50 miles an hour, and having a nice, smooth, open road. And although you did picture parking there in 2 lanes, the truth is that unless the shelters are being used, as you can see from this photo you have up, that there's not going to be parking. So the lane is going to be at places close to 20 feet wide, which is a really huge roadway. And so if your goal here is initially to make things safer, I think what we know is speed kills. And when a bicyclist or a pedestrian is hit by a fast-moving car, if a car's going 30 miles an hour, we know that there's a 90% chance that a pedestrian is going to die in that with that impact. And so I would like to see, I would like to echo some of the things that other people said about some real traffic calming. I don't consider white paint traffic calming. I consider it white paint, which vehicles ignore. Traffic calming has to do with speed tables and speed humps and bump outs. And so I think if you really want to make it safe, I think that's what you need to look at. And I think we really need to reconsider the money that we're spending to repave this, especially if in 2 years we're going to come back and say, well, we're going to tear up all of the stuff that we just repaved. I also worry that the white lines are going to be done in that, I forgot what it's called, thermoplastic maybe, which has a 3-year shelf life. And if we're going to redo this in a year, there's no point in having that those really expensive white lines. So I have many concerns, but really the resurfacing and the safety, resurfacing and thinking it's going to be safer is a real concern for me, because I think cars are going to go faster. I think there's going to be more pedestrians and cyclists that are hit. So that's what I got to say.
Thanks, Nancy. I see Kim and then Jean, and then we're going to have to wrap it up, just so we do have to move on to our next presentation. And there is opportunity for also people to go to Engage PGH and give feedback. And we can also have Domi back again for a follow-up meeting if that's the way it works out. But so I'd like to give Kim a moment, and then Jean.
Hey, everybody. Call me Kimberly. And
sorry.
Okay, people do it all the time. Yeah, I just wanted to chime in with the tenor that has been established so far. I think I'm very, very concerned as a person who walks there daily with my dog that cars drive too fast. And this plan to resurface is only going to make cars go faster. And the other thing is, most people are walking in the street now because the street is closed, and that's lovely. And I also don't want to see the city spend a lot of money on asphalt that's A, going to make people go faster, and B, is going to be ripped out anyways. But most people don't walk on the place where you have the pedestrian lane. I mean, first of all, it's quite steeply sloped there, so it's not very comfortable to walk there. It's much more comfortable to walk on a flat surface, which is why most people walk on the path, or I don't know whether you're calling that a sidewalk or not, but it's a path that most walkers, especially people with dogs, tend to stick to. And I would rather see more investment in that sort of bucolic, lovely path that goes under the trees than to spend money on a asphalt where I'm not going to walk to begin with. And I really strongly second or third or fourth, the idea of traffic calming measures that will actually work, like slow bumps, that will force cars to slow down because they are going to accelerate. They do. I mean, I've been living here for 22 years, and it's a constant problem. The speeding cars around the reservoir at all hours. So I don't like the idea of it sounds like what's going to happen is it's just going to get wider and more asphalt and not less, which is what we ultimately want.
Thank you, Kimberly. Jean?
Yeah, hi, this is Bruce, Jean's husband. We share a Zoom. And yeah, I'm on kind of the same page as Kimberly and everybody else, particularly around the walking. Yeah, the big issue is that people tend to walk in the center of the road because that's the flattest part. And so if you make a wide walking trail on the slanty side, it's not, I mean, it's an improvement, but it's not particularly helpful. And I was wondering if, and I suspect it's just too late to change designs, but yeah, if we invested instead of repaving a road that we want people to drive slow on, if we invested the money to just essentially make the path wider, that's on the right side of the road and wide and flat, and could accommodate, make that 11 feet wide or 12 feet wide so that, people can walk side by side, and again, on a flat surface would be huge. That would be a real win because, like everybody else has said, making a nice flat roadway is not going to help us. So anyway, but I really do appreciate that you guys are working on this, but that would be my vote, is to extend that pathway on the right side and not invest in repaving this road where we want people to drive slowly anyway. So thank you.
Thanks, Bruce, and thanks everybody, and thanks, Paige. I think one other thing that was sort of hinted on and that we might have talked about in earlier meetings was that there's no need for parking the whole way around, right? So one way you could do slow people down is to get rid of some of that parking and just make that, again, a green bump out for long stretches. So I think that was something that had been discussed before, but I'm going to let you guys, if you want another minute to wrap up on any final thoughts, that would be terrific. And then we're going to move on to our second presentation.
I have a question. What about, I know people won't do this, but instead of forcing them to slow down and so they don't hurt their car and you have to be careful not to, bump into things on the left, is there a way to enforce the 15-mile-an-hour speed limit with radar or more police presence or something to make me encourage people just to do it right anyway?
I'm happy to respond to that and some of the other comments that we heard. So again, Kim Lucas, Director for DOMI. Thank you all for the feedback that you shared tonight. I saw Paige was taking notes. I was taking notes. We will definitely take a look to see if there's any that we'll be able to incorporate this year. As I mentioned before, look at this as state of good repair and safety improvements as interim. This does not preclude future investment, but I will say that the investment that has been identified through the RAD funding for this work is predicated on the improvement of that bike and pedestrian infrastructure that we talked about. And so that money can't be repurposed outside of the scope that we provided to the RAD board to get approval for that funding. And it is money that is tied to this fiscal year. And so I did want to share that. With regards to the speed enforcement note and the earlier comment about people driving way faster than the posted speed, you're absolutely right. So we lowered it to 15 miles per hour in parks, in a few posted parks, in part so that the police are able to enforce it when people are going, 27, 28, 30 miles per hour. Previously, when it was at 25, they couldn't really enforce except for when people were going 10 miles over. And by that time, people are hitting almost 40. And so by reducing the speed to 15, we increase the ability to enforce at speeds that are uncomfortable, especially for a park setting. We are hoping to work with the state legislature to allow us, the city of Pittsburgh, do automated speed enforcement. So this is something that we are not currently authorized. That means using cameras to enforce speed requirements. We're not currently authorized by the state to do that. The city of Philadelphia is the only one in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that is able to do that. But we believe that it could be a game changer for safety in our city. So please be on the lookout for any future opportunities to participate. If you support using technology like that, like I heard one person mention tonight, please know that we're pursuing it, and we really hope that we'll get that authorization.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much, Kim. Thank you, Paige. It was great having you. And again, if there's an opportunity to do another round of feedback with maybe some changes, that would be great. Now we have to move on. We do have another important presentation today. We have, I'm going to let Keith, I'm not sure who is presenting, but Keith Portugal from the City Planning Office is going to kick it off. So Keith, I'm going to hand it over to you. Sorry for that confusion earlier. I lost track of who was doing which presentation.
Not to worry. So very quickly, this is now a development activities meeting. When developers come to sorry, I'm trying to share, but it's not letting me, window, here we go. Oh, perfect. So yes, currently development activities meeting. It is the Pittsburgh Zoo entry renovations, as you all well know. And here is how we ask everyone to participate. For presenters, please clearly describe the slide being presented in order to assist those participating via audio to follow along with the presentation. After the presentation, it'll be much like what we had for the Q&A for the DOMI presentation. We'll use chat and Q&A tools. We'll answer people who raise their hand, and I don't believe we have any voice call-ins. We have the development activities meetings because registered community organizations receive applications from, well, the city receives applications from developers. RCOs will host meetings such as this one, and it's a way for the community to engage with the developers. I'll be taking notes. As you already know, this is being recorded as well. And my notes will go to a review board and a commission. The city remains neutral and makes no conclusions. If you have any strong feelings about the project, you are urged to consider attending the board or commission meeting and testifying. So now I'll begin. Oh, sorry.
Put your slides into presentation mode so that it's larger.
Okay.
And just so everyone knows, so this particular project has to go before the Civic Design Commission, which is sort of the new version of the Art Commission. Any structure in a city park have to go before the Civic Design Commission, and the Highland Park Community Council is the registered community organization. And so we will draft a letter that sort of summarizes public comment and community interest and concerns, if any, about the project, and provide that to the committee before their meeting.
Yes, here are ways to reach the Public Art and Civic Design Commission. I'll put this up again after Mr. Evans's presentation.
Great. And Keith, do you know when the hearing is for this particular project in front of the commission?
No, not yet. I can provide that in a follow-up.
Thank you.
And I'll share once again in just a moment. Okay. John, would you like to go?
Yes. Can everyone hear me fine? We're good. Thank you. My name is John Evans. I'm with LGA Partners. We are the architect for this project, engaged with the zoo. We also have on the phone representatives from Clavin Design, who are the landscape architects for the project, so they can help kind of describe some of the landscape and site improvements, and also answer any questions about the landscape design that you may have. We also have representatives from the zoo on as well, to answer some of your questions about the project. So I'm going to do a fairly brief introduction, really focus on the design, big picture goals, and then we'd be happy to have a discussion and answer any questions or concerns that you guys have. Next slide. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the existing conditions. These are photographs from recent years of the entrance to the zoo. A couple of challenges with visitor amenities was the primary one, and then accessibility, obviously, and just really thinking as the project was conceived about what this plaza, could be as more than just this kind of concrete area where individuals are waiting before entering the zoo. And also thinking a lot about how just the concept of ticketing has changed with virtual tickets and new technology available, and what that sequence can really look like now that we have to worry less about the idea of just people standing in line to pay cash for a ticket. Next slide, please. So we really started with three kind of high-level goals that really formed the design for both the landscape and the building that we're presenting to you today. The first was to improve the visitor experience from the point where we have people parking in their vehicles. Most of the people are arriving in that way, all the way through to when they actually enter the zoo through the escalator elevator at the top of the hill. Providing better facilities for staff, having those facilities for staff located down near the entry for certain key personnel, particularly those focused on kind of member services and the visitor experience, can really help them serve, the potential customers and the people coming into the zoo better in that location than if they have an office in a remote location. So that was one of the keys as well. And then a focus on sustainability and conservation. A lot of that you'll see in the site and the solar panels and other features that we've added to the building, but also just thinking again how that those technologies and those techniques can be displayed to the public. So people that are waiting to enter the zoo, or waiting to meet their friends to enter, or waiting to purchase tickets, can actually see and feel and touch those kind of sustainability and conservation efforts, which are really at the heart of the zoo's mission. Next slide, please. So this shows the site plan for the new buildings and the parking lot and driveway entrance to the north, a new accessible pathway leading up to that. And then there's essentially two gates. The first gate, which you can see when you enter the pathway there, is the front kind of security gate. And then you can enter the plaza. That's where you can wait, use restrooms, ticketing, and then you move through the sort of turnstile gates into the actual zoo entrance. And then this connects to what will be the new Zoo Fit Trail, which actually will be an improvement to the pathway that leads up to the zoo for those who would prefer that to taking the escalator or elevator up the hill. Next slide, please. The buildings themselves are fairly simple. You can see there's two buildings here. The one on the left houses some accounting functions, that relate to ticketing, as well as member services, a ticketing area, member support, and an employee break area as well. So again, giving those staff who are there comfortable space to be able to just sit down, kind of take a break within the building itself, rather than having to go to a different location. The building on the right houses visitor services, security functions, and an office. And then it also has the restrooms. And you can see that's over half of that building. Will include men's, women's, and family toilet facilities for people who are waiting to get into the zoo or down in that lower plaza. There's also in the center an energy exhibit, which will be one of those areas where we can sort of highlight those sustainable features like the renewable energy and the solar panels and other things, so that people can actually come in. Those exhibits can, change over time. They could be more static, but they're a way for people to really see, feel, and touch the different elements of sustainability and conservation that we've incorporated into the project. Next slide. So these next two views show renderings of the buildings and site, just to give you guys an idea of the overall concept. So you can see here the accessible path leading up from parking, and that 2 levels of kind of entry to the zoo, and then the 2 buildings, and then the pathway that goes up to the elevator and escalator. Next slide. This view shows that landscape and how we've really gone from, sort of just this, call it almost like cold plaza, where it really doesn't feel welcoming to guests or visitors, to this experience where we actually have this really nice, engaging landscape, areas to sit, areas to take a break. Obviously the function of being able to purchase tickets, whether they're done online or if you need assistance, or groups that are coming through, like school buses and school children. This will really help move those people through in a more efficient way as well, while giving people who do want to just sit, relax for a minute, those kind of spaces where they could do so. Next slide. The next couple slides just show some of the materials, getting a little more into the details of the design that we've reviewed with the Civic Design Commission. Punched metal, some of which will be actually perforated with some artwork that relates to the mission of the zoo, green roofs on the buildings, solar panels, and then the signage that will enable people, and it could be digital signage, some of it will be static, but that's what's going to enable the zoo to show messages about ticketing, pricing, different events that are going on. So part of these buildings can actually become sort of a living display for those people who are visiting the site. Next slide. And again, just showing kind of that variety of materials. Really, by design, these buildings were intended to be sort of understated. We really want the landscape and the idea of processing through the gate into the zoo to be the central focus, not these buildings, right? They're, functional ticketing, restrooms. And so we kind of kept the materials very understated, but trying to get some variety to really keep these, as kind of a beautiful part of that public space that we're creating in the plaza. Next slide.
I believe
that might be it.
All I have from you.
Great. So as I said, we're obviously happy to answer any questions. We wanted to keep this, fairly high level and design focused, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
That's great. Thank you, John. Before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to take a minute to provide some background information, because we've had a lot of new folks move into the community in the past 10 years, and they might not know the history about that area, and that's something that was not touched upon in your presentation. So I am going to, oops. Howard, can I share my screen, please?
Sorry about that. Then,
Thank you. So let's see if I can do. All right, so this is not the best picture, but it's the one I could pull up fast. This is sort of an aerial map view of Highland Park and the zoo parking lot. And the upper left-hand corner where it says Hess Run, that's sort of like a poorly placed label. That's actually Morningside, okay? And so you can see the two reservoirs really clearly. The white line that goes down between the sort of adjacent to the far left reservoir is the top of One Wild Place. The big pale green area with the red spots is the main part of the zoo. There's some on the other side of the road. So again, you know this when you drive down One Wild Place. And then Howard did some scribbling. That's the parking lot. So for those that haven't been here or aren't familiar with it, this used to be a valley. And it was a water course ran through there. It's called Heff's Run. And it was water that actually came down, flowed through this valley and entered the Allegheny River there. And this is what it looks like today, an aerial view. On the right, you can see the closed reservoir. On the left is Morningside. Again, the perspective is kind of funny because Morningside is up on the hill, but this gives you a sense of the scope of how large the parking area is. The entry is sort of halfway down on the right, so that semicircular area. That's the area that they're talking about this evening with their plan. And what people tend to lose track of is that this is actually Highland Park. Right, this is the zoo leases it, but it's all city land and it's all park land. And so what had happened over the years is that the valley, originally this was the entrance to the park. There was a beautiful bridge. I have a picture of that you'll see in a minute, but the city dumped a lot of infill there from other projects, particularly Hers Island. The incinerator fill ended up here, and eventually it became like this parking lot and sort of this wasteland, which is really a big eyesore and environmentally just a very negative element of our park. If you look at the bottom, so you can see what the cars are in the picture. That's like the main parking area. Up towards the river, there's some additional parking area. If you park there, I believe it's over a half mile to get to the entrance across hot asphalt. In the bottom part of the picture, that's the south end. That's as you're heading towards the neighborhood, towards like the playground. That's between Morningside and Highland Park. King's Estate is down there, sort of on the bottom. And if you go a little bit further down to the right, this area right now, we took a walk there last week. Here's what it looks like now. The zoo stores a bunch of stuff. The dumping here is a combination of Public Works and Domi. It's sort of a free-for-all. It's really actually a disgrace to the city. Nobody's really willing to take responsibility for it, but they dump all sorts of junk from building projects and whatnot there. But you can see if you keep walking in, you get to woods. It's beautiful. It's part of the park. It's, the original valley is over 20 feet down below, but it is an amazing, isolated, potentially spectacular part of the park. And it is the opportunity to connect physically Highland Park, the park, Highland Park, the neighborhood, Morningside, and the rest of the East End to the zoo and to the water. And so if you weren't around, there's been two big planning and community engagement drives in the past 20 years to look at what can be done to restore this property. So it is, we get sort of the natural benefits of for the ecosystem, for the watershed, for the diversity. We get access through trails to the zoo and to the waterfront through multiple places. You can see the dark green lines are some proposed access points for trails. In this particular design feature, the plan, there was a couple different design workshops that were done. And this one, it was 3 separate parking structures. So the one that says, there's sort of 3 different size parking structures, the 1500, 250, and 250. And the rest was going to be, again, trails, green, maybe ball fields that would connect folks to the waterfront. And again, if you haven't been engaged or paying attention, there are long-term efforts going on right now with conservation groups in the city and the foundations to reclaim all the waterfront on both sides of the river and create waterfront trails. And so this is the access point for Highland Park to get to the river so that we'll be able to access the waterfront, access potentially like with boat launches, but also to the waterfront trail. So you could ride your bike from the East End to downtown through the park and then up the waterfront trail, Some of you might be familiar with the Brilliant Line Railroad. That's you went right on this map and went sort of up the Allegheny River. It's sort of past the Highland Park Bridge. It's the old railroad bridge that's no longer in use. Thank you, Howard, off in that direction. The Aspinwall Riverfront Park has acquired the right-of-way to that railroad. So there's long-term planned to make that a pedestrian walkway across the river and then attached to Highland Park and sort of the hillside on the far side of Nagley Run down there. So you could ride your bike, again, down past the zoo to the waterfront and then turn right, make your way over to Aspinwall, get on the far side of the river. You could bike to the North Shore and the stadiums, right? So there's a lot of potential here. That's been talked about for a long time. It's a over $100,000 in planning and community engagement work has been done on this over the years. This is a picture of the original bridge. So this is the bridge that's Washington Boulevard. And you can see the water. Don't know if it's flowing or stagnant at this particular point in time, but there was water underneath the bridge, and it was built again as a thing of beauty because it was like the entrance to Highland Park, right? And then if you lived here, like I moved here 15 years ago, this bridge was gone by that point, and the bridge they put in, you couldn't get underneath it. They actually physically created a structure that just blocked the end of the valley. But about, I don't even know how many years ago, 8 years ago, maybe now, that bridge was replaced. I don't have a picture of the new bridge, but the new bridge was deliberately designed to be open underneath, again, because the community has been talking about this plan. When I speak about the community, I mean broadly, all the environmental groups, the foundations, the Parks Conservancy, the city. There's been a lot of activity around, making all this happen. And so the new bridge that's there now was designed with this plan in mind to restore Hess Run. This is an excerpt. Again, it's hard to envision what it could look like. This is an excerpt from one of the earlier designs of like potentially you could, put the parking facilities further down in the valley, like near where the ticketing entrance is now, and have all this green space again up near the bridge. So again, you have this beautiful entrance to the park. You can see it, in this particular version, a path that would come down and give people access to the waterfront trail. So, I think it's really important to make sure people understand that there's a vision for so much more for the space and so many more positive things for everybody. There's a potential for really positive environmental outcomes, public access to green space, to trails, transportation, but also for the zoo, because right now the entrance to the zoo is really, frankly, pretty ugly. I mean, it's a big asphalt wasteland. And while this project, beautifies the ticketing area a bit, it really doesn't address the bigger issue, which is when you arrive there, you're in an asphalt wasteland. And so that's sort of the concern that, we as a community organization have had about what's happening there. On the left, I sort of put side by side so you could sort of see sort of the comparison of what the space would look like. Now these are totally approximations, 80% parking and 20% park, but there's a vision of flipping that, and giving the zoo the parking it needs by adding some verticality and reclaiming that beautiful space for the community, for the city. And, people think parking garages and they think about, the ugly things downtown. That's not necessarily what parking has to look like. These are some zoo parking garages I just happened to find doing a bit of search today. The left is down in New Jersey at the Turtleback Zoo. The mural at the top, that's the Philadelphia Zoo. And at the right is the San Antonio Zoo. It has a big green wall and it's got, fun giraffes and stuff like that. So, the parking lot, again, there's this opportunity to really make the zoo's entry something spectacular, make it sort of elevate it so it looks like the regional attraction that it is, including having a modern facility for parking as opposed to like this big flat surface area, which is really quite outdated. No one builds things like this anymore. For, again, environmental reasons and the fact that this is prime real estate in a park, it doesn't make sense to use it for parking. Again, found some other sort of fun parking structure pictures as I was searching. So that was sort of our concern, is that there's been a lot of activity. The zoo recently repaved about half of its parking area without talking to us. And again, like there's this opportunity for a lot of stuff to happen. But like this particular plan doesn't seem to like take any of that into consideration. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think Keith wanted to speak, and we can open it up for questions.
I was, yeah, just going to ask, well, I'll put up my slide from earlier about any contact information for the commission, if you'd like to provide that testimony, if anyone else would like to do that as well during that future meeting.
Keith, can I
so
just ask you, can you just put that into the chat, and that way?
Oh, yes.
Keep the video feeds live.
Yes. So here's a website. Oops. Followed by.
So like, and I'll pose this to John or to members of the zoo. You know, if you were to rethink Hess Run and put in, say, a parking structure, that might not be where you want your ticketing anymore. Or you might not want to have it directed towards Morningside. Like Morningside, like one possibility in rethinking Hess Run is rethinking the entrance. Having all the traffic directed through that little tiny road up into Morningside is a real problem for Morningside and for zoo patrons, particularly on your rad days when it gets backed up for miles. If there was an entrance directly into the zoo parking from one of the two lights, you could control the light cycle, keep people moving. But again, then if people are coming from a different direction, this particular plan for the ticketing area might not really make sense. And so we want to see, we would like to see some more conversation about the opportunity that we could use in this space, the things that could be done to, again, really elevate both the zoo and the park in ways that benefit everybody.
Yeah, no, I think you know, obviously any project that we work on from the design side, right, we're making sure that we're thinking about kind of the day zero condition, which is what we have to deal with today, as well as the future. I think one of the things about the zoo entrance that, you know, no matter what happens in that parking lot, right, you have a certain procession. It was that hand sketch that we did that kind of shows how you come down the escalator, and, you know, you're always going to be coming down in that location, right? Even if, you know, whatever we do, it has run. So I think we've had conversations around that. Again, our scope obviously dealt with the project in front of us today. But certainly that sketch, and, you know, there were more like it, really thought about kind of how it connects to the zoo on the top of the hill. And, you know, that point where that ticketing place is really the spot that's always going to be that entry gate, regardless of what you do in that valley. But again, we weren't involved in those earlier planning efforts, but just, you know, it is always something, obviously, as architects and designers, that we are thinking about.
Great. All right, I see a couple hands up. I saw Randy and then I saw Sabrina.
I guess I would just like to know if the folks at the zoo are currently doing any other planning down there. In other words, one of my big concerns is that while the architectural drawings you provided are attractive, and I understand for the goal you were set why it's a nice plan, but from where I sit, you know, I'm really hoping to see less zoo infrastructure in that valley. I see you moving some extra zoo activity down that way. And I also, you know, you mentioned that the entry is always going to be there. I'd like to know if there's any other, I would like to see something that doesn't go in that direction. I'd like to know if there's, are you doing any other planning right now about what's going to happen down in that valley? It's really hard to have a feeling one way or another about this proposal without understanding how it fits into a larger set of issues about what's happening with that valley.
Thanks, Randy. Sabrina?
I'll start out by saying I'm really happy that we're having the larger conversation, because I do think it would be lovely to have, even if this is a short-term plan with limited scope, similar to the previous presentation, to understand how it fits in the context of a larger vision the zoo might have, especially for Highland Park and Morningside residents who sit right, like we are, the zoo's neighborhood, right? So it would be wonderful if the zoo would be more open or willing to plan about like how can we have this shared vision long term. I have a smaller question. You're talking about moving a lot of the offices down to the front. There are residents who walk to the zoo and we come in the back. So I would like to know if that's still going to be possible. Will we be able to come in the back of the zoo, or is that going to be cut off with this new plan?
Brad, I don't know if you want to talk to that, or if we may not be sure about that yet. That's not something I'm aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably like to defer that to Jeremy if you don't mind. I know he has.
Sorry, yes.
Jeremy, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, we've heard loud and clear from the community of the interest for a back entrance. You know, as we were doing our stakeholder interviews and whatnot, that was certainly something that a number of people had requested back there. Obviously,
well, wait, it's not a request. You can go in the back through the education center. That's how my family gets to the zoo. We walk to the zoo and come in through the education
right, and that's not an official way to get back in. We've accommodated it, and it actually causes a lot of problems for us, quite honestly, as far as staffing and control and whatnot.
Can I push back on that though? Because as a resident who lives very close to the zoo, the sidewalks.
I'd like to really focus on the building and the project, because that's what this meeting is really about. We're not discussing our whole new master plan that we'll hopefully be unveiling and discussing with people a couple months down the road. But this is really about taking an old, tired entrance and in that exact same footprint, updating it for, you know, our guests, to be greener. That's really what this meeting is about. I know people are trying to take it in
I
all
know
directions,
that that's
but
in your mind what it's about.
This meeting is about the architecture and the building, and we'd really like to keep it to what the meeting is supposed to be about. So
the
there is
meeting
a
is about
lot more to
hearing
come. I
feedback
will
from,
say that.
Excuse me, I had my hand raised.
comment?
I'd really like to speak. This meeting is about hearing feedback from the community, right? You guys have a plan. You want to hear feedback from the community.
On the front entrance, on the architecture of the front entrance, on the
But if you're
appearance of the
changing,
front entrance.
if the changing of the front entrance impacts other aspects of the community's access to the zoo or that area, it's relevant to the conversation, I believe. And if you're saying like, we're going to move the offices down there and neighborhood members, you're cut off from walking to the zoo, you have to drive and park in our parking lot. I think that's a really big change just about the plan you've presented. Forget the master plan
Sorry, excuse, I'll let you finish. There are 2 offices basically moving down there. So a total of, I think, 3 people out of the 50 people in the administration building currently. So it's a convenience for a couple of key people down at the entry to be located there. But the primary functions of the current education center and administration center are going to stay the same.
Okay.
Okay, Nancy and is your hand still up, Nancy?
Yep, my hand's still up. So a couple of issues, I guess a comment on the actual entrance is that I appreciate the green infrastructure aspects of it, such as the green roof and the solar panels. I want to sort of tag team, since we've got the community here and we're giving you feedback. The asphalt is just not cool anymore. We talked about that the first part of this meeting when we talked about Reservoir Drive. It's got all kinds of problems. So I would certainly support anything in the future to help get rid of some of that asphalt. My more immediate question is, since I get around town on bicycle, if I were a bicyclist and I were wanting to visit the zoo, how would I get there without getting hit by a car, and where would I put my bicycle?
That's a great question. John, did we have any bicycle racks and parking there? I don't remember seeing it in any of the renderings.
Rochelle, I know we discussed it, and it's something that we can certainly address.
Yes.
I think
The,
Oh, go
the,
ahead,
the
Michelle.
answer to that is yes, they will be in that area. The renderings that are shown are sort of broad stroke, but we will have accommodations for those that want to come to the zoo on bicycle.
Okay, and what about safely getting around negotiating the parking lot? That can be quite crazy. Say on a Sunday afternoon where cars are just going everywhere, every which direction, looking for parking spots. Would there be a safe way for a bicyclist to approach?
So we are working with the city and pushing the city very hard to fix the fencing, the horrible sidewalks on One Wild Place that we all know is an incredible eyesore. And I know this association has been pushing for that as well. So anybody coming down that route, and obviously bicycles, there's a bicycle lane, they shouldn't be on the sidewalks, hopefully, but we are working on improving with the city access into there. But the parking is a whole nother discussion. I mean, I'm just being blunt about it, that we share a similar vision as far as access down through the trails that Stephanie was pointing out, greening up the lot, making it more friendly for pedestrians and or cyclists. So there's a lot of shared vision. We don't agree with a lot of the old plans from 20 plus years ago, but we do agree on a lot of those aspects. And in the future, as we design anything, like I said, we want to incorporate, we want to make that connection down to the river. We want to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. We want to green it up. So there's a lot of things that are in the future for that parking lot. And once again, that's obviously a huge discussion. It wasn't to be the basis for the discussion tonight. It was really about basically renovating and replacing an existing structure within an existing footprint, and not really talking about the huge issue that is parking and traffic and all those other things. So we acknowledge that, but like I said, that is not really tonight's discussion.
Right. Dr. Goodman, you mentioned a master plan. Have you done any public meetings, or I'm not aware of any? Have you been looking for input from the public about the master plan?
We did, and I believe they actually, pretty sure that they met with you and David as well. Is that correct?
They met with me individually, but I mean like a public, to talk about these issues, like how the space relates to the park.
It is not finalized yet, and we're really not ready to put it out there for additional discussion. But we did promise the city that the master plan will go in front of the what was the Arts Commission as well for full public comment. And they don't approve a master plan per se, but we will go through the process.
Yeah, it's just really hard to think about this without understanding how it fits into the bigger picture, because the valley is the valley. So even though this isn't an existing footprint, his footprint is in the valley. Let's see, David and Mac, and then Howard.
Well, Stephanie, I think you just made my point. I mean, typically a master plan is shared first, and then the individual buildings that sit within it are then, what comes out of an agreed upon master plan. So, this kind of sounds like we're out of sync with how that should be shared.
And what I would say is that this project has been ongoing since before my arrival, before we even thought about doing a master plan. So I do agree with you that that should be the normal approach, but this project was already well underway prior to us even approaching a master planning firm.
Thanks, David. Matt?
Hi, I think that, just to echo Stephanie and what David said, I think that's at the heart of this. The issue that a lot of residents are feeling is that, at least to me personally, I won't speak for anybody else, this meeting, this presentation almost just feels like you're checking a box. Like, we have this plan, we have to go in front of the committee or the community to show them this plan. We're going to show 4 slides, and now we can check a box on the punch list to get this through, instead of engaging the community, perhaps before your time, Dr. Goodman, on the design of this and what the zoo is planning, because it looks like to me that's already been done and you're just presenting stuff that has already been decided. And that doesn't seem like good community engagement to me personally.
Thanks, Mac. Howard, and then Andrea.
So yeah, sort of on this point, I just want to ask a kind of a specific question, which is whether going forward with this specific project forecloses opportunities in the master plan. And I'm just kind of restating something that I think Stephanie and others have stated earlier. I know you don't want to discuss the master plan for some strange reason, but the question that I have is, you know, if this project goes forward, can you say, hey, doesn't it constrain what you can do in the master planning process with regards to all these other issues? And I think that means that this project is probably not well timed from a planning point of view.
I would say that our plans call for that entrance to stay in that location. So that we feel very comfortable and confident on. If we weren't comfortable and confident on the entrance staying in that location, then I would certainly have pushed this down the road. But you know, I do believe that, and our master planners do believe as well, that that is the proper location for that front entrance.
Thanks, Howard and
I
Dr.
just
Goodman.
also wanted to, we talked about public input. We did put out surveys, and we did receive input from over 9,000 individuals from the greater Pittsburgh community. So, and we did take all of that into account during the planning process as well, just for the record.
Thanks. Thank you, Andrea, and then Randy.
Yeah, you know, I was kind of thinking along the same lines, like if your master plan, a beautiful master plan, obviates the structures and the investment that you will be making in what looks like a really beautiful entrance, then what? What happens then? Like, would this not be part of an ultimate master plan for the next, what, 20, 30, 50, 80 years? That's all. Thanks.
Randy?
Jeremy, just a couple more things. First, your comments about how this is completely consistent with your master plan, I think just makes the point we're trying to make to you, is that we feel like we as the community where this facility sits have a right to have input into your master plan, and you're moving your master plan forward incrementally by showing us this one piece of the plan without letting us see how it sits in to your larger plan, which it seems like is probably further along than any of us know or have seen. And I also just want to remind you of two things. One is that, you know, the zoo sits on parkland leased from the city, and your lease hasn't been renewed yet, right? I'm a fan of the zoo. I went to the zoo as a kid. Let me finish, please, Jeremy. I went to the zoo as a kid. I took my kids to the zoo when they were growing up. I love the zoo. I want the zoo to do well, but I really also want the zoo, and in your personage, to recognize that you sit on city land and you owe the city, I think, more attention to the concerns of this district. And in particular, you sit in a neighborhood, right? You sit and you impact our neighborhood in a large way. And to date, you may feel like you've done community input, but I think you're hearing the community tell you that they don't feel like you've done that. And this is a case where perception is reality for us. And so I really encourage you not to view us, as you said in a recent letter to your board members, as a challenge you need to overcome, right? But as an opportunity to engage. And I hope you will sort of reset how you view your relationship with.
Thanks, Randy. Are there any final comments or questions? There were a couple of questions in the comments that I'm hoping either Dr. Goodman or Keith could be able to answer. One was the date of the committee meeting and where the slide, I think the slides are on the Engage PGH site, and that's posted on our website. So Erin, you can get to the slides through our website. But then Sabrina was asked if there is a summary of the all the community engagement that you were talking about.
We do have a lot of data. It's not in a report format per se, but we do have from our master planners their compilation from their interviews, as well as a very, very large spreadsheet of comments and ratings. So there is that input calculated.
Can I just ask a quick question about that? How was that data collected?
It was there were two ways. One was our master planners did go out and meet with key stakeholders, Stephanie, David, the city, various other groups as well that were, we felt were very, very important to provide input. And then the other was a massive SurveyMonkey survey that was sent to, I believe, 24,000 people, of which we had 9,000 responses.
Great. Well, it would be super. Again, I'm not sure where you are in the process, but the city has really, especially in the past several years, undertaken an effort to do more community meetings to really engage people face to face, particularly neighbors, through meetings like this. We're not your only neighbors. You also have Morningside up on the cliff right above you, and I know that they have a lot of vested interest in what happens in the zoo and in Hess Run too. So it would be great if there's still opportunity to do some sort of public meetings where we had a playground in the Highland Park that got replaced a number of years ago. And the planning department, I think we had like maybe 3 or 4 public meetings. They revealed different stages of design. They did online surveys. It was a very interactive process where they got solicited input from the community. Again, not just us, but like park users, and were able to show us incrementally how they sort of adopted our feedback. They showed different options, got opinions on what worked and what didn't work in people's views. And that process really got community buy-in to the playground and a lot of excitement behind it and a lot of support for the project. So like we would love to see, something similar happening with the zoo, because it's a huge resource for the neighborhood and for the city, and it's right literally in our backyards. So so I think that's it from the community's part. I don't know if you all have any final words, or if Keith, if you've been able to track down when the date is of that meeting. We will be writing a letter to the committee, so we need to know like when and where to send it, and that's all changed because I used to interact with the Arts Commission, but like I don't know who the contacts and stuff are there at the new body.
Once I have the schedule out, I will send it to you, Stephanie, and then hopefully you can distribute it out to the community. And yeah.
Great. All right. Any Dr. Goodman or Keith or anyone else have any last?
Just one final comment. As I mentioned, we want to solve the same problems that we know exist. We have an ugly parking lot. We want to solve the traffic problems. We want to make the connection to the river. We want to green things up. So I just really would like to focus on all the positive things that we're in agreement on. Exactly how we get there is, going to be a lot of conversations and discussions. Like I said, there's always a process to go through with public hearings, explanations. This was good feedback for me to hear as far as when we are ready to unveil and have those public meetings on the master plan, some of the things that people would like to see and understand better. So I certainly appreciate, everybody's comments tonight. And like I said, this is an important project for us, and that we got to get people through the gates. And, this is an old ticket area, which has fallen apart and, is basically a disgrace currently to the zoo, I think, and to the community. So like I said, I appreciate everybody's feedback and, look forward to working with everybody in the future.
All right. Well, great. Thanks everyone for coming. Presenters and community members, we always appreciate hearing from folks. And
Stephanie,
Monica, I see. Sorry. I saw
Yeah,
that
thank you. Thank you. Dr. Goodman, will you commit to a time frame and sitting down and starting to work through some of these things that we all agree upon that we want to do together? Will you commit to starting that conversation so we can start moving in the right direction?
I have been committed since I've gotten here as far as having those conversations. One of the first people I met with was Stephanie and David. I've been to the meetings on Hess Run. So I've been committed since day one on continuing those conversations. Like I said, might not always agree, but it's very important to communicate. I don't have a date or a timeline as far as when we'll be ready to start rolling things out yet. We're still, like I said, in the process and figuring things out. Things are still changing.
Right. I guess you keep talking about rolling things out, which suggests that you're really not interested in community input. So this is what I keep hearing.
Rolling things out
is
community
not
meetings. How about that?
Okay.
I mean, we made great progress. We spent a lot of money. We have great plans. And I know you like to say that they're from 20 years ago, but they're actually from 5 or 6 years ago. And we have been stalled. We haven't been able to make any progress because of the zoo and because of the zoo's position. And I realize that we must be a thorn in your side, but we're not going anywhere. And we would really love, we would really love to continue that conversation and to get it moving again.
And I think the goal, and this is always the goal for progress, is compromise. And I'll just end on that, communication and compromise will move things forward.
How would you like us to compromise on our end?
I'm just saying that we want certain things, you want certain things. Let's meet in the middle. There's a lot that we agree on. And
we would love to have that conversation, honestly. I was president. I had Stephanie's job for about 12 years. So I would love to start having that conversation again, anytime you want.
Sounds great. I will take you up on that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a long meeting. I appreciate you hanging in there, but a lot of good ground was covered. So thanks, everybody, and